You ever hear a whole room laugh at you, your own blood, while you're holding a piece of cake in your trembling hands? That's how my 75th birthday went. They had told me it would be a surprise party. My daughter-in-law insisted I dress up nice, said it was important to look sharp for the photos. I thought maybe they'd actually remembered me this year. Hell, I even put on my late wife's favorite tie. The house was packed. Music, balloons, even one of those tacky metallic "Happy Birthday" banners. I walked in, and everyone yelled surprise. For a moment, I actually felt something warm in my chest. Like I still mattered. But then came the speeches. My son raised his glass and said, "Here's to Dad. May he live long enough to forget where the bathroom is, so we can finally put him in a home." The room erupted in laughter. My granddaughter recorded it on her phone. Someone shouted, "Don't trip on the candles, old man." They all laughed harder. I stood there, smiling like a fool, because what else could I do? My hands were shaking, but I didn't want them to see me cry. I've buried a wife, fought in wars, built a career, raised ungrateful children, but nothing ever made me feel as small as that moment. Later, while everyone drank and joked, I sat alone in the corner with a paper plate of cake, pretending not to hear them whisper. But I heard every word. About how I was holding up the inheritance, about how senility must be setting in, about how we'll have to deal with him soon. I don't know what burned more, the humiliation, or the realization that they don't see me as family anymore. Just an obstacle. That night, after the last car left and the fake smiles faded, I stayed in that empty living room and stared at the cheap balloons wilting against the ceiling. My wife's old photo looked down at me from the mantel. And I whispered to her picture, "They think I'm finished. They think I'm weak. But they've forgotten who I am." Because here's the truth, I'm not going to a nursing home. I'm not going to fade away quietly. I'm going to make them regret every damn laugh. And I know exactly where to start. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces laughing, glasses clinking, my son with his smug little toast. At 3 a.m., I made tea the way my wife used to, too much sugar, strong enough to melt a spoon, and sat at the kitchen table with her photo beside me. I spoke out loud, like she was still there. "You'd tell me to let it go, wouldn't you? That they're just ignorant. But you'd also remind me of the promise I made. See, when she was dying, she made me promise not to let our children tear each other apart over money. Protect them, even from themselves," she said. But sitting in that silence, I realized, what's the point of protecting people who treat me like garbage? I decided then, I wouldn't protect them. I'd teach them. Slowly. Carefully. The first seed of revenge came from something small, almost stupid. That birthday card. The one my grandson forgot to sign, then shrugged and said, "Doesn't matter, he won't notice anyway." I kept it. Stuck it in my jacket pocket. Something about it felt important. Like a reminder. A few days later, I walked the neighborhood. Old man habits, you know. But this time I paid attention to gossip. Mrs. Carmichael, my nosy neighbor, was out front pruning her roses. She leaned in close and whispered like we were in some spy novel, "You know your daughter's husband owes money?" "Gambling," I heard. "Big money." I didn't let her see me react, but inside my chest something lit up. So that's why they were circling like vultures. Debts. Desperation. My humiliation wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. They wanted me weak, so they could move in on what's mine. I went home and pulled out the old metal lockbox from my closet. Inside were my papers, deeds, accounts, investments. My family thinks I'm just a pensioner scraping by. They don't know half of what I've tucked away. I've been careful, secretive, ever since the 70s when I learned not to trust anyone, even kin. But revenge isn't just about money. It's about psychology. About making them feel as small as they made me feel. So here's what I did first, I called my lawyer. Not my son's buddy who handles their wills, but my lawyer. An old army friend who owes me favors. I told him, let's make some changes. Quietly. And as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a message. From my granddaughter. A video. The video. The one of me standing there at my party, holding that cake, smiling like an idiot while the room laughed. She'd uploaded it to TikTok. Captioned it, "When Grandpa still thinks he's relevant." It already had over 10,000 views. And that changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just family. The whole damn world was laughing at me. And I swore, I'd make her regret pressing upload. I must have watched that TikTok 100 times. The angle, the shaky phone camera, my wrinkled face frozen in that stupid smile while everyone howled around me. The worst part wasn't the laughter, it was the comments. Strangers. Teenagers. Random people typing things like, "Just put him in a home already. That antique wouldn't even sell on eBay. The inheritance better be worth the wait, lol." My own granddaughter had invited the world to laugh at me. And the world was more than happy to join in. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat there, watching, while my tea went cold. And then I started thinking like a younger version of myself, the man my family doesn't remember. The one who used to solve problems in ways that weren't exactly clean. First thing, I needed leverage. I went digging in my attic that afternoon. Old trunks, dusty boxes. I found what I was looking for tucked inside an envelope marked with my wife's handwriting, for later. Inside was a letter she'd written years ago, an admission about a secret savings account she'd kept hidden from even me, back when she worried about the kids being reckless. I'd forgotten all about it. I checked. The account was still active. Not much by today's standards, but enough. Enough to stir the pot. The next step? Information. My son, the one who gave that toast, works at a local firm. Big shot accountant, likes to brag. But bragging means slips. And I remembered him once laughing about creative bookkeeping. So I paid a little visit. Nothing dramatic, I just showed up at his office with coffee. Pretended to be the doting old man who needed help understanding taxes. But I've read ledgers longer than he's been alive. And while he explained numbers like I was some halfwit, I saw it, lines that didn't add up, names that shouldn't have been there. Shell accounts. Side money. Fraud. I walked out of there with a fake smile and a mental note, my son wasn't just greedy, he was sloppy. That night, while the house was quiet, I sat with my wife's picture again. "You told me to protect them," I whispered. "But maybe the only way to protect them is to break them first." I slept well for the first time since the party. But the next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. It was my daughter. Face pale, hair a mess. She shoved her phone in my face and hissed, "What the hell did you do?" On the screen was another TikTok. Not the old one. A new one. Uploaded just hours earlier. It showed me leaving my son's office. Someone had filmed it. And the caption read, "Grandpa snooping where he doesn't belong." I stared at the video on my daughter's phone. Grainy footage, sure, but clear enough to show me stepping out of my son's office, clutching a folder like some sneaky burglar. The caption burned in my skull, "Grandpa snooping where he doesn't belong." Who filmed this? I asked. She crossed her arms. "That's what I'd like to know. My brother's furious. Says you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Funny, I thought. He wasn't furious that his dear old dad was wandering around downtown. No. He was furious I'd been near his office. That told me everything. I shrugged, kept my voice steady. Just trying to understand my finances. Nothing wrong with that. Her jaw tightened. "You're paranoid, Dad. Everyone sees it. Maybe it's time we talked about options." There it was. The word she didn't want to say out loud. Options. Nursing homes. Power of attorney. Stripping me of independence. I let her storm off, but inside, something shifted. It wasn't just greed driving them. It was control. They wanted me out of the way, preferably somewhere quiet where my questions wouldn't matter anymore. That night, I walked the neighborhood again. The air was cool, leaves crunching under my shoes. I passed Mrs. Carmichael's porch. She gave me a look like she knew something. Maybe she did. Small towns leak secrets like cracked pipes. Back home, I pulled out my wife's old watch from the drawer. Broken face, hand stuck at 9:15. She'd worn it every day until it died. I'd kept it all these years, meaning to fix it. Now, holding it in my hand, I realized it was more than a memory. It was a reminder, time doesn't stop. You fix what's broken, or you let it rot. And I wasn't going to rot. So I started taking steps. Little ones. I opened that hidden account my wife had left. Shifted a small amount of money, enough to raise eyebrows if anyone was watching, but not enough to leave a traceable dent. A test. 2 days later, my son called me. His voice was sugar, but the kind that sticks in your teeth. Dad, I noticed some activity. Big moves for someone your age. Maybe I should handle that for you. I almost laughed. He'd taken the bait. He was watching me. Which meant he was worried. Which meant I had power. But then, just as I was savoring that thought, he said something that chilled me to the bone. Listen, Dad. You keep this up, you're going to regret it. For everyone's sake, stop digging. Stay out of things. Or else. And then the line went dead. I sat there in the silence, the broken watch heavy in my hand, wondering. Or else, what? When my son said, or else, I thought it was just bluster. Empty words meant to scare me into compliance. But 3 nights later, I learned otherwise. I woke to a crash. Glass shattering somewhere in the house. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't heard that sound since the war, when windows blew out from nearby shelling. I grabbed the old flashlight I keep by my bed and crept down the hall. The living room window was smashed. A brick lay on the floor, shards of glass scattered like ice. But it wasn't random vandalism. Taped to the brick was a note. You're embarrassing the family. Stop. No signature, of course. But I didn't need one. I sat on the couch, staring at that brick for what felt like hours. They thought I'd cave. They thought fear would make me crawl back into line. But fear doesn't work the way they think. At my age, fear has no teeth. Death is already sitting in the room with you, sipping tea. What's one more threat? The next morning, I swept up the glass, pocketed the note, and went about my day like nothing happened. But inside, I was boiling. I made a call to my lawyer friend again. Told him, draw up a temporary will. Nothing permanent yet, but let's make it clear, if anything happens to me, the money goes to charity. Every last cent. He laughed softly. You've always been a strategist, not a simple player. That afternoon, I had a little chance meeting with my granddaughter, the TikTok princess, while she was waiting for her rideshare. She smirked at me, phone in hand, probably seconds away from recording me again. I leaned in close enough that she had to pull back. You like putting me online? I whispered. Careful, sweetheart. Sometimes the internet doesn't laugh with you. Sometimes it laughs at you. Her smirk faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Later that evening, I walked past Mrs. Carmichael's again. She called me over, all excited. Did you hear? Your son-in-law, big trouble at the casino last week. Owes more than he can pay. People are talking. Pieces of the puzzle were snapping together. Debts. Fraud. Public humiliation. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. They needed me gone. But here's the thing, I wasn't going anywhere. That night, I took out my wife's broken watch again. Turned it over in my hand. For the first time, I noticed an inscription I'd long forgotten, etched faintly on the back. Never let them decide your time. I almost laughed. She'd known. She always knew. I went to bed calmer than I had in weeks. But at 5 a.m., I woke to flashing red and blue lights outside my window. Police. They were at my door. I opened the door to 2 officers standing on my porch. Young men, barely older than my grandson, hands resting on their belts like I might lunge at them with a walker. Mr. H., one of them asked. Yes. We've had a report of suspicious activity. I blinked at them. At 5 in the morning? The taller one shifted uncomfortably. We got a call from a family member. Said you've been confused, agitated, wandering at night. Breaking things. Possible danger to yourself, or others. I felt my stomach drop. There it was. The trap. They weren't just mocking me now, they were building a case. Paperwork. Records. The kind of trail that gets a judge to sign off on protective care. I forced a smile. Officers, would you like to come in? Have some tea? I'll show you I'm as sane as you are. They looked at each other. One nodded. I boiled water, poured tea, kept my hands steady even though rage was crawling up my spine. I told them about my routine, my walks, even joked a little about being old but not dead yet. I watched their eyes soften as they realized the confused old man story wasn't sticking. Before they left, I asked, which family member called you? They wouldn't say. But I already knew. After they were gone, I sat in the kitchen staring at the steam rising from my untouched cup. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were laying groundwork, brick by brick, for the day they could haul me off without my consent. Well, two can play at that game. I called my lawyer again. Told him to get a psychiatric evaluation scheduled, on my terms. A clean bill of health, signed and sealed, before they could pull another stunt. Then, on impulse, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called an old army buddy. A man named Frank. Retired now, like me, but still sharp, still connected. I told him a little, just enough. He chuckled and said, "So the Cubs think the old lion's toothless, huh? You need a hand, you just say the word." That night, I couldn't shake the image of my granddaughter's smirk, my son's threats, the brick through the window. They thought they were circling prey. But prey bites back. The next morning, as I opened my mailbox, there was another envelope waiting. No stamp. No return address. Just shoved in there overnight. Inside was a single photo. A photo of me, sitting at my kitchen table, holding my wife's broken watch. Taken through the window. I stared at that photo for a long time. Me, in my own kitchen, holding my wife's broken watch. Taken from outside. They weren't just calling cops now, they were watching me. Recording me. I didn't get angry. Not right away. Instead, I felt something colder. Something I hadn't felt in years. Back in the service, when you realized an ambush was coming and you had a split second to decide whether you die like a target or fight like a ghost. I chose ghost. The first thing I did was pull the curtains. The second was call Frank again. I told him, "It's time." He grunted. "You want eyes?" he asked. "I know a guy." By nightfall, I had a small camera of my own, a cheap thing you could buy online but good enough for what I needed. I mounted it under the eaves, disguised by an old wind chime. Another one inside the house, aimed at the front door. If they wanted to play surveillance, I'd give them a taste of their own medicine. Then I started moving my pieces. Quietly. I withdrew a little more money from my wife's hidden account, this time to a cashier's check. Bought a safe deposit box at a different bank under a different name. Every paper, every deed, every account statement went into that box. My family would find nothing but dust at my house now. But I didn't stop there. I went back to my son's office, not in person this time. Frank helped me pull some public records, some filings. And sure enough, there were gaps. Missing forms. Bad numbers. Enough to get him into serious trouble if the right eyes saw it. I didn't plan to blow it up yet. No, I'd save that for later. I wanted him sweating first. The next Sunday dinner was at my daughter's house. She invited me, sugar in her voice. "We just want to check on you, Dad. Make sure you're okay." I went. Played the part. Ate their overcooked roast. Listened to them chatter about nonsense. Watched my granddaughter scroll on her phone, probably planning her next viral clip. And then, halfway through dessert, I dropped my first little bomb. "I've been thinking," I said, dabbing my mouth with a napkin. "Maybe it's time I made some changes to the will." The room went silent. My son's fork froze halfway to his mouth. My granddaughter actually looked up from her phone. My daughter's smile twitched. "Oh," my son said carefully. "What kind of changes?" I smiled back. "Don't know yet. But I'm meeting with my lawyer again. Might leave a big chunk to charity. Or maybe to a veterans fund. Still deciding." The tension at that table was thick enough to cut. My son tried to laugh it off, but his eyes were glassy. My daughter's hand was shaking as she poured more wine. My granddaughter started typing furiously on her phone. I just sat there, eating pie, feeling the shift. For the first time since the party, I wasn't the one being toyed with. But as I stood up to leave, my granddaughter muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "You won't even make it to the next lawyer meeting." Her words stuck with me all night. You won't even make it to the next lawyer meeting. A teenager's empty threat? Maybe. But the way she said it, calm, confident, told me she wasn't just mouthing off. She was echoing something she'd overheard. They were planning something. And if they wanted to corner me, I'd bite first. The very next morning, I gathered my notes, my copied records, the inconsistencies I'd found in my son's books. Numbers missing, transactions hidden under fake clients. I packaged it all up, neat as you please, and sent it off, anonymously, to a local journalist I knew from years back. I didn't expect fireworks right away. These things take time. But I wanted the fuse lit. While that brewed, I turned my attention to my granddaughter. She'd humiliated me online, painted me as a doddering fool. Two could play that game. Frank showed me how to dig, basic stuff, but enough. Her public profiles, her posts, her little lies. And then I found it, videos of her partying underage, drunk out of her mind, vaping in bathrooms, selfies where she posed with bottles, pills, and cash, trying too hard to look like some kind of outlaw. All still public. All easy pickings. I didn't post them myself, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I packaged them, tied them up with a bow, and sent them anonymously to her school administrators. To the dean of students. To the college admissions office she'd been bragging about getting into. 2 days later, I heard the fallout. She came storming into my house without knocking, face red, tears streaking her mascara. "What did you do?" she screamed. "They suspended me. They're reviewing my scholarship. Do you know what you've done?" I just looked at her calmly, sipping my tea. "Funny," I said. "Feels a bit like the internet isn't laughing with you anymore." She slapped the cup out of my hand. Porcelain shattered across the kitchen floor. Then she stormed out, screaming curses all the way down the street. Messy. Imperfect. But effective. One piece off the board. That evening, my son called me, his voice sharp. "What the hell are you playing at, Dad? First my office, now my daughter? You're tearing this family apart." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm not tearing anything. I'm just holding up a mirror." He hung up without another word. That night, as I locked my doors and set my little cameras to record, I felt the tide turning. They'd drawn first blood at that party, but now they knew, I wasn't going to sit quietly while they dug my grave. But I also knew something else: wounded animals are dangerous. And my son was desperate. My daughter's husband owed sharks. My granddaughter was crumbling. Desperation makes people reckless. And 2 nights later, my cameras caught it, a figure creeping up my porch at 2 a.m., holding something in their hands. Gasoline. I watched the grainy black and white feed from my little camera, my heart thudding but my hand steady. A hooded figure on my porch at 2:07 a.m., clutching a red gas can. They bent down near the siding, fumbling with a lighter. I'd suspected they'd try something, but I didn't think they'd go this far. This wasn't a scare tactic. This was an attempt to erase me. I didn't call 911 right away. I let the camera roll. Evidence. Ironclad. Then I stepped quietly to the hall closet, pulled out the heavy flashlight I'd weighted with batteries. My wife used to joke that I was paranoid keeping it there. Guess not. I yanked the front door open before the lighter sparked. The hooded figure jumped back, spilling gasoline across the porch. "Going somewhere?" I barked. They froze. And then the hood slipped just enough for me to see her face. My daughter. She stared at me, eyes wild, hands trembling. "Dad, just stop. You're going to ruin everything." I stepped out onto the porch, the smell of gas thick. "You were going to burn your father's house down?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "We didn't mean for it to get this far. We're drowning, okay? Tom owes money, the house is under lien, and you're sitting on all this while She broke off, sobbing. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the brick, the cops, the humiliation. I lifted my phone and showed her the live feed. "Smile," I said softly. "You're on camera." She went pale. I stepped aside and let her flee into the night, gasping and swinging. Didn't try to stop her. I didn't need to. By dawn, the video file was already backed up in 3 places, one with my lawyer, one with Frank, and one on a cloud drive she'll never crack. Along with every record of my son's fraud, my son-in-law's debts, and my granddaughter's antics. This was no longer just a family squabble. This was criminal. And I decided, no more subtlety. I called my lawyer at 7 a.m., "Send everything to the state AG's office," I said. "All of it. Today." He hesitated. "You're sure? Once this goes out, there's no coming back." I stared at my wife's broken watch on the table, its hands frozen at 9:15. "Never let them decide your time." "I'm sure," I said. That night, as the sun set and sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice, low and trembling, "We know what you did. We're not going down alone." Then the line went dead. And when I looked out my window, there were 2 black SUVs parked across the street. 2 black SUVs sat across the street, engines idling, silhouettes inside. No markings, no plates I recognized. They didn't move for 10 minutes. I didn't panic. I'd been here before, staring down threats in the dark. I knew the drill: don't run, don't break routine. Make them move first. I turned on every light in my house. Put on my best shirt. Set a pot of coffee to brew. The smell filled the kitchen like an old memory. I laid my wife's broken watch in the center of the table. A small piece of my life, the same way she'd been the small piece that kept me human. Then I dialed my lawyer. "It's time," I said. While the coffee percolated, my camera streamed live to the cloud. My documents were already with the Attorney General, my statement sealed, my will redirected to charity. If anything happened to me, every journalist on the mailing list Frank had built would receive a package. At 9:15 on the dot, the time frozen on my wife's watch, there was a knock on my door. Not a bang. A polite, almost timid knock. I opened it. 2 officers stood there. Real uniforms this time. Behind them, one of the SUVs. In the passenger seat, my son, pale and shaking. "Mr. H," the taller officer said. "We're here to inform you that multiple charges have been filed. Fraud. Tax evasion. Attempted arson." He glanced at his clipboard. "We have reason to believe you've been the intended victim. Would you be willing to come down and make a formal statement?" Behind him, my son's eyes met mine. He tried to sneer but couldn't. My daughter sat in the other SUV, hands cuffed, mascara running. My granddaughter wasn't there. I'd later learned she'd turned her phone over to police and fled to a friend's house. I just nodded. "Of course, officer." The next weeks were a blur. Statements. Court hearings. My son-in-law's debts dragged into daylight. My son's shell companies unraveled like cheap string. My daughter's plea deal. My granddaughter's public apology after the TikTok clip surfaced of her trying to mock me at the party. It wasn't clean. It wasn't neat. It didn't feel like a Hollywood ending. But slowly, painfully, the noise died down. The threats stopped. The inheritance they'd circled for years evaporated into legal fees and fines. The house stayed mine. The watch stayed on my table. And one cold morning, months later, I finally took that watch to a repair shop. The man behind the counter opened it up, cleaned it, wound it. It ticked again. He handed it back, and I strapped it on. The hands pointed to 9:16 now. 1 minute past the moment it had frozen. Time moving again. On the way out, I passed a young couple arguing about money. The woman said, "You can't just take from people and expect them to lie down forever." The man muttered something under his breath. I smiled, just a little. I walked home through the crisp air, my wife's watch ticking softly on my wrist, thinking about the party, the humiliation, the laughter. It all felt like a lifetime ago. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel old. I felt dangerous. Because the truth is, revenge isn't clean. It's not even satisfying the way you think it will be. It leaves scars, burns bridges, sometimes even breaks pieces of you that can't be fixed. But it also does something else. It reminds the world, and yourself, that you're still here. Still ticking. And when I closed my front door behind me, the house quiet again, the cameras finally shut off, I whispered to the photo of my wife on the mantel. They thought they could decide my time. They were wrong.